Kia ora koutou. Welcome to the TeLENZ Legal Tech webinar series. My name is Wayne Rumbles, Associate Professor at Te Paringa Faculty of Law at the University of Waikato. I am the project leader of the Technology and Legal Education for New Zealand project, or TeLENZ, funded by the New Zealand Law Foundation as part of the Information, Law and Policy project. Technological developments do and will continue to raise issues and challenges for government, business and civil society, and have implications for both legal education and legal practice. The law faculties are in a strong position to prepare law graduates for legal practice and IT-driven changes now and into the future. The vision for the project is that all law students in New Zealand are exposed to technology and legal innovation throughout the core law curriculum. To achieve this vision, TeLENZ has teamed up with academics from across the 6 New Zealand law schools to build greater digital capacity and to develop a set of tools and resources that any academic can use to integrate technology and the impact of technology into their core law courses. The project has 3 strands: the creation of teaching resources and the development of New Zealand-specific research in the area of legal tech, and thirdly, the creation of networks and dialogue between academics, practice, and tech providers, both nationally and internationally. Today, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the TeLENZ Legal Tech webinar series. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the first TeLENZ Legal Tech webinar, Tom Maasland, partner at MinterEllisonRuddWatts. Tom is a graduate of Canterbury with a BA and LLB honours. Tom leads the Technology, Media and Communication practice at MinterEllisonRuddWatts, where he specialises in business technology contracts, commercial contracts, emerging technology, privacy and data protection, and cyber security. Today, Tom will talk to us about a collaboration between MinterEllisonRuddWatts and McCarthyFinch, authorDOCS. authorDOCS is a suite of legal AI software. authorDOCS utilises modern cloud architecture with a use of machine learning and natural language processing. authorDOCS opens up the AI black box, and every decision made by authorDOCS is explainable, auditable, allowing users to make legally defensive statements to courts, regulators, and auditors. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Tom. Tom.
Thank you, Wayne. Kia ora and good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, and also thank you to Richmond for pulling this event together. I know he and I have spoken many times about doing a collaboration around McCarthyFinch, MinterEllison, and yourselves, so great to be here today. As Wayne said, and thank you for the intro, I'm a partner at Minters. I do head up the TMT team, our national practice, with my focus really being on technology contracting law. So what does that mean? It means everything from large-scale technology transformation where corporates are swapping out their legacy systems for shiny new boxes, and involvement around procurement, negotiation, contracting, and in-life arrangements, and also exiting those arrangements as well when they come to their natural end or come to a brutal early end. So that's at one end, right through to the more run-of-the-mill software licensing agreements at the other end, and everything in between. But I get to wear a couple of other hats in the firm, which really leads me, I think, to this conversation. I'm on our future of work team, which means we're evaluating what does a future law firm look like, how do we use technology to better serve our clients in a more effective and flexible way, and how do we help our staff to be more flexible in the way they work as well. So that's been a really interesting area to be involved in as we look forward as well to what a future law firm looks like with the ongoing development of products like artificial intelligence. And I'm also the partner in charge of innovation at the firm, which means I get to play with all the fun stuff that people try and sell us from time to time. That includes things like deal platforms. You may have heard of companies like My Dockyard. So they set up very interesting platforms where large M&A transactions run through just the one SaaS product with all the various integrated parties linking into the middle of those. I get to look at things like chatbots, which a company like Joseph, you may have heard of, our affiliate law firm in Australia, MinterEllison, runs a number of chatbots of Joseph, using Joseph as its platform. that they're using one for COVID-19 response. Actually, it's a really interesting area to look at. So we're looking at chatbots as well. Automation solution, things like authorDOCS, where companies like us, firms like us, have lots of highly repeatable contracts. Using document automation means you get the consistency of the same document in the same way each time. And we also have a product which we sell to clients and run an automation program for them as well. So we get to play both using them internally and sharing them externally. And finally, the other area I look at, which brings me to today's conversation, is AI solutions. So we've had the multinationals like Kira, Luminance, Thought River come to talk to us about their products. And for those of you who aren't aware of those ones, do Google them after this. Kira is spelled K-I-R-A, Luminance, like the light, and Thought River as it sounds. Their products, which are huge global, globally backed AI products for document review. And so, yeah, as part of with my hat on as being the head of innovation, I get to play with all these products and then to evaluate which of those might be suitable for a firm like ours to use. Now, I think it's important to pause and just think about a New Zealand firm framework. We're quite small in a global sense. I mean, we're big. We're 300 odd people at Minters in New Zealand and in Auckland and in Wellington. But globally, that's a very small law firm. So a lot of the legal tech products in the market at the moment are designed for your multinational law firms, your Allen Overys, your Freshfields, your Clifford Chance, Herbert Smith Freehills, with thousands of lawyers in multiple different countries who run M&A transactions across multiple time zones and multiple languages, with just thousands upon thousands upon thousands of contracts needing to be reviewed in extremely short time frames. So the likes of Kira and Luminance and those ones, they're really designed for the mega firms. Which means in firms like New Zealand, we can't afford to build those products or buy those products in, which means we have to use our number 8 wire and see what we can do internally, which is where this conversation begins. Our journey to creating an AI product ourselves and not buying a global behemoth product dates back to 2016. And it was a chance meeting between our then Chief Technology Officer, Nick Whitehouse, now CEO of McCarthyFinch. Nick and the late Ray Thompson, for those of you who don't know Ray, really inspirational guy, was chair of Goat Ventures for many, many years, hugely invested and prominent investor in the tech community in New Zealand. So he and Nick were on a delegation together to Israel to look at the startup nation with Simon Mutter back in 2016. And on many hours of being on buses traveling across that country, Nick and Ray got to chatting about disruption. That's with the Trans-Tasman Business Council, and they were talking about disruption of the last area probably to be disrupted being the legal industry. Could disruption come in? If so, how? And should it be something that maybe law firms and technology companies should start to look at more carefully in New Zealand? And when Nick returned, he pitched to the partnership and said that he thought there was a real opportunity here, that AI was a thing. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about AI for 50 years or longer, but is it a thing now? And at the time they started talking, it is a thing. It could really disrupt the legal industry, but it could also truly benefit those who embraced it, or it could simply wash away those who don't. And if you think of the Kodak invented the digital camera, yet was completely disrupted by its own invention because it didn't take it and adapt it and work with it. It tried to, in a way, fight against it. So we set 3 goals of Nick to go and explore this first. We said we'd need to have 3 targets sort of covered off, or 3 goals covered off. One, we had to learn about how will AI impact law as a whole. We had to learn about how AI introduced into a law firm like ours would impact staff. So would we see a massive reduction in staffing levels? And thirdly, could we get a commercial return on this? There's no point in pouring money down a big dark hole if there's no future opportunity of a return. So we did have to have an eye on whether or not we could commercialize this. I mean, there's always the hope you build the unicorn, right? So missed out on Lotto on the weekend, but it would have been nice if we could sell this for the same amount of money. And so from humble beginnings, McCarthyFinch was born. McCarthyFinch is a joint venture between Goat Ventures, which is a prominent formerly New Zealand headquartered, now headquartered out of the States, venture company, very tech-heavy company, and us. We both put in quite a lot of seed money, but predominantly we put in a lot of sweat equity. So we put a lot of time and effort from our lawyers to help build out the products that led to the development of the AI product itself. And quickly on the name, why McCarthyFinch? Finch part being Atticus Finch, the literary lawyer, and McCarthy being one of the founders of AI. So brought the two names together. Every every startup needs a good founder story, right? So McCarthyFinch is the name behind it. So as I said, it's a joint venture between Goat and ourselves. It's now a wider limited partnership than that. We have a lot more investors involved in the organization, but that was the starting point. Then we engaged, or rather the team engaged 24 PhDs from around the globe at various points to help develop the AI product. And it is built, from scratch on the shoulders of giants, but it's built for us for a standalone product, being the engine that we call Author. So the engine is Author, that is the AI box, and as Wayne, you mentioned, it is designed to be an open box. A lot of AI is black box, that you don't see how the inner workings of this thing works. This was designed to be an open box. So as you build out the products, as you take on the products and use them, they're very much designed to be products that you can see how it's learning in front of you. You can get into the graph, you can look at all the various elements and see how it is learning, so you can actually correct it if it's starting to go in the wrong direction. It uses a concept called sparse data learning in it, which is a proprietary piece of technology which is going through a patent process at the moment. The sparse data learning meant that McCarthyFinch could, in effect, catch up to the behemoths that are already in the market, the likes of Kira and Luminance. And it means you can train the AI on a smaller amount of data points. Where Luminance and Kira's really, at the outset where they went, found it a bit difficult, is because they had they needed a huge amount of data points to train the machine. So they needed thousands upon thousands upon thousands of contracts before you even got started. And if each organization needed to train its own version of Luminance, it just took far too long to get started. So sparse data learning is a proprietary piece of technology that the guys have come up with under the Author engine, which means on a much smaller catchment of data points they can launch, they can get the learning moving much more quickly. So there are 3 products in market at the moment. One is called authorDOCS. Yes, that's a pun. Not a very fun one. But yes, authorDOCS is the first one. authorApprove is the second one in market, which I'll touch on as well. And there's a third one called Batch, which I'll touch on as well. So 3 products are in market. DOCS has been in market the longest. And DOCS is for, and I'll come on to show, I'm going to demo DOCS for you shortly. DOCS is a tool to help lawyers be more efficient. It is not designed to replace a legal input. It's designed to keep the lawyer very much in the loop. In fact, it's not really lawyer in the loop. It's more the technology is part of the loop of a lawyer doing an evaluation. It's designed to make that lawyer much more efficient. Statistics, I mean, it's been sold. So this has been sold in the US predominantly at the moment. It's been sold in New Zealand and in the UK and in Australia. Australia, US probably the biggest markets at the moment, New Zealand third. And what we're seeing statistically is that it's 50% saving of time when you review a contract by using authorDOCS. And I'll show you why in a minute. And for those who do work day-to-day in contracts, you'll see how beneficial it can be. But what's really interesting about it is when we launched it, we find people use it in lots of different ways as well. It doesn't have to be just for contracts. It can be used in an RFP process, responding to RFPs. It can be used in anything where you have optionality around what you do. So that could be letter writing. It could be all sorts of things. It could be writing submissions to government in any way where you need excerpts of things you've done before and want to draw them into a document, or whether you're reviewing things that refer out to other definitions within a contract or refer to other clauses within a contract. A lot of different ways of looking at it. It's predominantly designed for contracts, as you'll see, but it can be used, and we are seeing people finding really interesting use cases in other ways. So DOCS is designed to make lawyers more efficient, more effective, and predominantly more consistent. And this is why it's really, really great in a legal context from a law firm, but also from a law faculty perspective. It means people who are using it are using the right clauses every time, and they're using them in the right context every time. Lawyers who work in large law firms or work in small law firms, you use precedents or use examples from the past, will often just drag a clause into a contract because they've used it before. And they may not have any realization of why they used it in that context, or they've forgotten why they used it in that context. And you very quickly get into a situation where you could be using bad clauses or clauses that may have been negotiated heavily or perhaps put your company or your client in the wrong position. Whereas authorDOCS allows you to use the right clause every time. And which means when your juniors are working with this document, you know the right clause is being used every time. So it makes lawyers more efficient, effective, and consistent. Author Approve, their second product, is designed for non-lawyers. This is designed to be so large procurement teams in an organization, and I always use like a bank as an example for this. If you have a huge amount of contracts coming into an organization like a bank, and the bank has a set number of lawyers, they can't look at every contract. Procurement teams will often triage or do the legal review for the legal team. And there's always a danger there is, do they know what they need to look for? Do they understand the regulations and how that flows into a contract? So I take, for example, in the banking industry, there's a banking regulation called BS11, which has a set number of clauses that must be contained within a contract for an outsourced service. And if you left the procurement team alone to look at those clauses, would they know what to look for? And if they don't know what to look for, they push all that onus onto the legal team, which is too small to deal with them all. If you used Author Approve, you can actually email your contract into the AI engine, Approve. It will then evaluate that contract against a set number of parameters that you preset for it. It will mark up the contract for you. It will put bubble comments down the margin, and it'll feed that back to you in an email. So it's like going to a private practice lawyer who does a quick review and bounces it back. And it does it in minutes, where lawyers like that would probably take a little while to come back to even just say, I've got it, I'm going to look at it. So you get that back almost instantly. What you do then is you'd obviously evaluate whether or not that needs to go to your in-house legal team or not. So it helps really, really quickly to move that on. Author Approve is actually running demo at the moment on the interweb. So if you go online to checkthiscontract.com, if you just Google check this contract, not sure it's .com, but if you Google check this contract, you'll go to a website and you can upload your own template document and run it through. I think there are 3 examples that you can do at the moment. So you email your example contract in, you set your parameters, it'll send it back and say, here's what I found. So that's really a future way of using AI in a very simple way that alleviates the stress on legal teams, but allows companies to move very quickly to getting their products through the legal process and then into market. The third one is Author Batch, and this is the one I'm most excited about. It's not yet in market. It is in near launch, I believe. It's a multi-doc review. So authorDOCS, as you'll see, is a one doc at a time review. Author Batch is multi-doc. It identifies issues that you set. So you can send up to 20 contracts at the moment, whether they're PDF or Word or whatever. You send those documents up through Batch. You set your parameters around what you want it to look for. And then it'll spit them all back out and say, I found it, and it'll create an Excel spreadsheet for you and say, I found these clauses in these contracts with this is the issues that I found. Now, where that's really useful, if you think through what's going through the world or through New Zealand at the moment and causing a lot of headaches and contracts, is things like the Holidays Act. So the Holidays Act is causing a lot of companies a lot of stress. So if you have a tool that you can throw hundreds of different employment contracts into, because if you're a large organization with multiple different types of employment contracts, you can ask it to extract from those employment contracts all of the Holidays Act clauses and compare them against what should be in there. So that batch product is a really interesting product in that it can be used for any type. I mean, you basically let any type. Alex, to respond to your question, New Zealand law is being applied to that one. Check this contract is being applied under New Zealand law. So for batch, any contract can go up into that product set. You can apply it in any different ways, as long as you've got a multi-doc review and you're asking for it to look for certain clauses. Now, in a law firm like mine, we use it for things like due diligence. So when you have a sale going on of a large company and you need to do a due diligence review about what's going on in those contracts, looking for novation and transference clauses or liability clauses, whatever. You can set those parameters up, and it will extract all the data from the contract and present them back to you in a spreadsheet form. So the work that used to take lawyers like me when I started out in year 2000 at Bell Gully, and I was sent up to do the Telecommunications due diligence, and I was up there, I had to sign in by paper and pull a big cardboard box off a shelf and start wading through screeds of paper. It'd take me 3 weeks to get through, I don't know, a couple of hundred contracts, probably maybe a few more contracts than that. We can do that now in a matter of hours to extract the same information. So what used to take weeks and weeks and weeks and have huge, huge costs, we can now do in far, far quicker timeframes. Now, that doesn't mean the lawyer is out of the loop. The lawyer very much needs to check that. So it is not foolproof. It is not a replacement, but it is absolutely a product which is very exciting for law firms like ours. What is it? A lot of my partners actually, when we first put this product out, were asking, is this not just a Control F feature? Is it not just searching for a clause with a Control F? And the answer to that, as I've had to say many times to my partners, is no, it's not that. What it's done is it's been taught to look at the context. So a liability clause has words in it like liable, and you might be liable for damages or costs or expenses or all sorts of other words that are contained within a liability clause. And what it has been trained to do with thousands of legal hours worth of training and testing is to understand the context. So it doesn't just look for the word cost, because cost might also sit within a payment term. It doesn't look for just the word damages, because that could be sitting in a property damage section of the contract. It looks for the context of all of the pieces together and then presents an example back to say, I found the clause and it looks like this. And here is where you should go and look in the contract to see what it says. That's for docs. Under approve, you might then say, does that match my company's liability provision? And then it'll come back and mark it up accordingly. But it's looking at the context of the clause rather than a word in a clause. And where that's what makes that really interesting is if you then run when I show you in the demo, when you actually run the analysis over your contract, it comes up with a number of hits and then allocates them to you in a list. So it says, I've looked for the liability clause and I found it here, and it's under clause 13 and it's got the word liability in the top, and you go, great, found that. But I've also found it at clause 27 and at clause 34 and at clause 9. And you're like, oh, okay, what are those ones? And then when you click into them, you realize that it's right for the most part. There is a liability clause contained within there. It's just not where you'd probably normally look. So you're getting a lot of false positives, which really help your review. Because when you are doing a review for a client and you're saying, okay, go tell me what the liability position is under this contract, 99% of lawyers will go, I'll look at the liability clause and I'll scan the rest. But liability really is where it's sitting. But actually, you could have at clause 34 of the contract something else. And unless you are you're very pedantic, and which all lawyers should be, but unless you're very, very, taking a very close look at the contract on all parts, you might miss that clause. And particularly when you're doing a due diligence and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're on your 55th contract for the day and you've got a 34 to go, you might actually just go, I'm just going to look at the liability clause. So what this does is it triages that contract for you, presents back the hit list, then you can quickly go through and say, yep, I agree, I don't agree with that one, and I'll tell you why in a minute, and I'll train you AI. But you can go through that list. So it helps really, really well with that false positive one to help the lawyers look elsewhere. And then there's a data extraction tool, which I've talked about, and an alerting tool. So it'll actually look for what's not there. So sometimes when you're a lawyer, again, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're looking for it through a contract, you forget to look for the things that aren't included. You're always looking at what's written on the page, but you may not be looking at what's not there. This will actually alert you to if there's something missing. So if, for example, you want to have a liability clause because you want your liability to be capped under the contract and someone hasn't put one in at all, you could, if you're tired, miss it. So that is really helpful as well, so it can alert you to what is missing. So before I do the demo, a couple of little things about it. How do you get it? You get it by going on to the Microsoft App Store, and it is sitting right there under Author Approve. You can download it. I think there's a 45-day free trial. Go for your life, knock your socks off, and have a play with it. It's actually a really fun thing to do, and we've had companies who have all sorts of security restrictions about using SaaS-based products or cloud-based products, unable to use it. They then use it on their personal computer just to play with it at home, and they go, oh, I'm going to get my IS team to try and work this one through because it's really useful. So it's through the Microsoft App Store. You just need to be on Microsoft. Doesn't have a Google one, unfortunately, at this stage, but need to be on Microsoft. Download it, and away you go. You can start using it straight away. As I said, it makes you 51% more efficient in your contract review once you get going, and it creates an ability to have your clauses that you use day to day in hand. So I noticed there are a couple of chats coming through. I'm just going to flick through this to see if there are any questions in here I need to look for. Under that one, do you have to look from Mia? Do you need to have a lawyer to put the parameters in? No, not really. Again, it would help to have someone guide you, but your in-house legal team could help you with that. You certainly don't have to have an external lawyer to help. And in fact, McCarthyFinch, they've got oodles of expertise in this area. They can help with probably putting those in as well. But you could, if you know the parameters of what you're looking for, you can have a go yourself, and you can tweak it as much as you want to as well. So you can put it in, change it, try it again. And yes, it does make being a lawyer much more fun than sitting in a room at 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I agree. Any horror stories when legal AI systems have gone wrong? Not horror stories, examples of when it can go wrong. It certainly does do the occasional false positive, but that doesn't mean it's gone wrong. It means it's gone false positive. So you can sort of go, okay, yep, that you thought that was a liability clause. You're wrong. I'm going to train you to show you that that's wrong, and so you won't make that mistake again. AI, which is great. It means you train the AI once as opposed to training 25 lawyers in the same way each time a mistake is made. Yes, Richmond is like having many more eyes going through a selected number of documents or material. It is literally like having the most fresh-eyed, smartest junior lawyer looking at every single one of your contracts and hitting it back to you in about 3 minutes as opposed to 3 hours. Is this machine learning rather than AI? That question I'll refer to Nick Whitehouse. We've had this conversation many times as well. I think he would say this is, there's a combination of natural language processing, machine learning, and all sorts of things. Where that sits on the AI spectrum, you'll have to talk to the experts about that one. But I like to think that it's encased within the whole AI idea. So without further ado, let me show you how it works. Can everyone see my screen with a document on it? Just seeing if I get some nods. Yep, great. Thanks, Richmond. Okay. So we'll zoom this in a bit more so you can see the contract a bit better. This contract is just a standard template agreement. I think one of my clients sent it to me to update at some point. I've completely anonymized it. It is just a bunch of words on a page now, but it was used as a platform development contract for a client some years ago. So it's quite long. It is 36 odd pages long. That would ordinarily take me to do a full review of that, probably something in the vicinity of 2 hours just to read from end to end to understand all the clauses, an hour and a half to 2 hours to read and understand. If I'm then going to go and compare it against previous clauses or update it to reflect a certain provision, then obviously I'd need a bit more time to do that and then to mark up the contract. So that's a 36-page contract. I mean, we get contracts up to 300 pages to review. In fact, there's one that I have to do after this call, which is over 300 pages long, and that can take lots and lots and lots and lots of hours. And it very, very, if you get distracted and halfway through that one, it can set you back a lot of time. So you have to set a lot aside, a lot of time to go through a contract of that size. So authorDOCS helps by really speeding up that review. This is authorDOCS here. It is on the right-hand side of my screen. You can see it's got a little icon up on my ribbon up here. So again, if I downloaded, well, we had a special version put onto our system early on, but if you were to download this into Word yourselves, it would sit on your ribbon up here like this. And you simply click on that button, take you through a login process, and it would end up on a screen like this. I can remove this bar, move it onto a side screen if need be, if I wanted to have more real estate on my page. you can see it's got 3 tabs at the top, a review, a draft, and a configure review tab. It is designed to help you review. It is also designed to help you draft. So those are the 2 features. The review is where the artificial intelligence / machine learning aspect comes in. The draft is where simple programming is being used in the back of this as well. So there's not simply an AI tool, it is a much more sort of broader use tool than that. This is a platform agreement, it's a technology contract, it is a supply contract. So I can choose from these packs here under the review to base my review on one of these. So this is probably an everyday supplier agreement, so I'd most likely base my review on this pack, which has been pre-trained on a certain number of clauses to look for. So under an everyday supplier agreement, the clauses that I would ordinarily ask it to look for are these types of clauses. Whoops. All right, a little bit fast. I would ask it to look for, those are my presets. I would ask it to look for audit. I'd ask it to look for confidentiality, dispute resolution, entire agreement, force majeure, governing law, indemnity, liability, payment terms, term and renewal, termination, warranties and representations. Those are sort of the general things I would want it to look for when I'm going through an everyday supplier agreement review. If I'm looking for if I'm reviewing a different type of contract, if I'm reviewing an employment agreement, for example, I would look for different clauses. If I'm looking at a construction agreement, again, different clauses. If I'm doing a property agreement, a lease, different clauses. If I'm doing a procurement agreement, again, different clauses. Now, McCarthyFinch is committed to do quite a lot of packs and keep bringing them out. There's intended to be a privacy one, which will incorporate the Privacy Act terms, Privacy Act 2020 as well as other things around data protection, cyber security, etc., etc. So they're committed to bringing out packs on a fairly regular basis. We've only been in market since 19 August last year. I remember now, something like that. August last year, I think it was. So we've only been in market for around about a year. And these are the packs they've already brought out. They only started with 3 at the outset. So they're committed to bringing out more and more packs. And within each one of these packs is a large number of clauses configured for the specific review. So as this is an everyday supplier agreement, I can then configure my review. I can actually create my own new review. So I can build my own new review from an everyday supplier agreement pack. I would name it, so this could be Tom Demo 2020 for TeLENZ. I could then remind myself what this review is about. So this review is about a demo for a TeLENZ group to see how AI works, or it could be this is a review of this contract to check whether this platform agreement contains Vodafone's requirements for a platform agreement or something like that. I can then tag which of those clauses I want it to review or not review, so I can turn some of those off if I don't feel it's necessary. I can also use a Boolean type search if there are any clauses that I really want it to look for that aren't listed in that list. So for example, exclusivity is not listed in that list, so I could add in my own Boolean search in here to put in exclusivity. So that is not using AI, that is just simply using a more strategic search tool. So that is more of your Control F type feature. So I would put in there, if I was looking at exclusivity, I'd look for exclusivity, restraint, or restrict, or words to that effect. I'd put in there and see what it would find for that one. I might also look in here for things like service levels or liquidated damages or service credits as well on top of that. So I could add all those into my Boolean search. I could also ask it to produce details to alert me if things that are there or are not there. So if, for example, I could ask it to alert me if the governing law of this clause is not New Zealand. I could ask it to alert me if the maximum liability amount is in excess of, let's say, $2 million, or that the termination notice period is less than 90 days. So I can actually do that, so it very quickly alerts me in red to say this is there or not there. And I can also play around with the specific clauses within here to, again, say if the dispute resolution clause is there or isn't there, that the entire agreement clause is there or isn't there. So it can very quickly move to telling me what I need to know very, very fast. So if there's a major problem in, for example, I'm doing a due diligence in this clause on this contract, I could know very quickly that this contract might have a novation clause in it or a no novation clause in it, which means this deal might not go through without consent from this client. So I can set up my review in any way I want to, and I can edit that review as I go through. Once I've saved that in, I'm just going to go to one that I use regularly, which is an everyday supply agreement for technology contracts, which has got set for an exclusivity in it. It's got set for service credits, escrow, intellectual property, etc. Once I'm ready, I click Run Review. So as I said before, this is based in the cloud. It's based in Microsoft Azure in Australia. So this contract is being encrypted. It is being sent fully encrypted up into the cloud, where it is then processed and then encrypted back down again. So it is under extremely tight security while this contract is being processed. As I said, 35 pages would have taken me probably 2.5 hours max to review and to get a handle on it. It's already done the review, so that took less than, I think it must have taken less than 10 seconds. And it's come back and presented to me a summary of what it's found. It's found the 12 concepts I asked it to look for. It's alerted me to 18 things I need to pay attention to, and it's extracted 5 details from the contract. So it's extracted that the contract term is 2 years, that it's under New Zealand governing law, that there seems to be rather high liability amounts in here, that the renewal term is a 2-year renewal term, and that it looks like there are 3 different ways you can exit this contract quite quickly, 2 immediately, and 1 on 12 months notice. Now, all of these are linked into the contract. So if I click on any of these, it will take me to the part of the contract where it found the various points. Now, for the eagle-eyed on the clause on the call, you'll see I put the word alligator in there. This is because I've been trying to trick it and to see whether or not it will throw anything out if I put random terms in a clause. So it's not just looking for a specific contract or specific wording, and it didn't fail on that one. So anyway, it's found the word, the governing law clause, and if I clicked on the liability clause, it's found that there is a liability clause of 30 million in the contract. So it jumps me straight into that relevant clause. It's also said that the renewal clause is, or the renewal term of this one is 2 years. So it's able to find the renewal clause and find the term within it and present it back to me. So none of these things make me horrified about the contract, so particularly that it's governing law of New Zealand, so I feel comfortable I can advise on this contract. And none of these are so outrageous as to make me think I need to go and run off and tell the client immediately that there's a problem with this contract. Then the next thing to look at would be the alerts. So I asked it to search the things. So these are the Boolean catches. So I asked it to tell me if there was exclusivity in there. I asked it to tell me if there was service credits, if there was escrow or not, to find the dispute resolution clause, etc., etc. So it's done those. So if I had a specific need to look at specific clauses, then I'd go to the alerts and be able to move quite quickly to making a contract summary for my client. But the point I think of real interest is really to show you how it goes doing the AI search and how it pulls things out. So it's gone through the contract and to find those specific concepts that we asked it to look for, and it's presented them back. And I think termination is probably the one that's most interesting to find here, because if you were actually asked to review a contract and say, tell me what the termination rights are, this has found 5 different clauses, well 4 actually, because those 2, or 3 actually, because those 3 are the same clause. But it's found 5 references to termination in here, including the termination clause, which is helpful. which is what it should find. So it's found the termination clause, and it's identified even the termination for convenience as opposed to a termination for cause clause, which is useful because actually termination for convenience is probably much more important, really, to understand how easily someone can walk away without any issue under a contract than termination for cause. So it's found those in there, and it means I can jump to them. And what's nice about that is it means I don't have to sort of scroll up and down. I can then go, okay, back to the term clause. What does the term say? So I can jump around within the contract quite quickly using the tabs on the right-hand side. As I said, though, it's found other references to termination. So it must have found reference to a termination clause in here. So if you were asked to advise on the rights to terminate under this contract and you had just gone to the termination section, you might have missed the fact that under clause 9.10, there is an ability to terminate this agreement in the event of a certain event happening here. So it does help you very quickly to find all the elements of termination set out in this contract. There's another one there at 37.3. So bookended in this contract are two other different clauses of termination. So that's how it finds them and takes you to them. There are two extra elements to it which I think are really, really important to show why this is so useful for creating an efficient use of your time and for consistency. So if I jump to the termination for convenience clause, in fact, I'm not going to use that one because I don't have any examples in there. I'm going to take you to governing law. So I've gone to the governing law clause, and I can see there that the governing law clause is New Zealand and that it's a non-exclusive jurisdiction of the courts of New Zealand. I might want to know, though, are there any other clauses that I might want to change that to, or are there any other examples of governing law clauses that I might want to compare this against? And if you see on the right-hand side here, there's this little box. It's called a comparison shelf. I can click on that, and I can bring up my comparison shelf where I've got stored in here a whole range, 10 other governing law clauses, which I could use as an example to compare it against. So I can look at my governing law clause here and say, is this what I need? Is there anything else I should have in here that I don't have in here? Or I can actually just replace the whole thing. And so very quickly, I can add this clause directly into the document. Also, given that it is something that is so helpful for lawyers to keep clauses which they may want to use in a future time, you can actually, under the draft section, create the clause yourself for your concept bank and drag and save the concept for a future time. So this means I can use it to compare against, or I can save the clause for a future use, or I can put the existing clause that I actually have that I've got in my clause bank into my contract. So the comparison shelf is really useful. Also, if you're acting for a client and the client has a specific version of a clause that they want to use, for example, as I was mentioning before, the banks have these prescribed contractual terms under BS11 rules that they need. You can save in here the BS11 clause for a particular bank and say that is ASB standard, or that is Westpac standard, or that is BNZ standard, whatever. So you can actually use the specific clause. I mentioned before that it can also go wrong. So if, for example, this was not an entire agreement clause and you want to tell it that it was so you don't have the same mistake again, on the left-hand side here's this little pencil number, and I can say wrong. And if I tell it it's wrong, it will then learn from that, and it will try and work out why in that clause it isn't the same as other entire agreement clauses that it has been trained to check on. People always ask me, but what if your lawyers go rogue and start clicking wrong on everything? I get told what corrections people have made from our organization from time to time, so I can check to see whether they're right or wrong. And if they're wrong, we can have a little training session. If they're right, then great. It is being trained. Likewise, if it missed one, so say, for example, it missed this clause as an entire agreement clause, I can add a correction using this little feature here. So it is then being taught how to search for other things in the future. Just finishing off a little bit on draft before I show you what this purpling thing is over here as well, which is a neat feature. So in the concept bank, we can add in, this is a demo site, so we can add into here all of the clauses that we use from time to time. So a lot of these in here are employment clauses because we've been doing a lot of employment training on this. But we can add into here all of our standard clauses. So when you are sitting in the office at 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't remember where you put your last most favored nation clause, contained in here would be your most favored nation clause, your favorite one, or the one that's been approved by your organization for use, and then you can drop that one straight into your contract. So the concept bank is probably every commercial lawyer's favorite part of this, because it means you get access to the clauses that you want to have access to when you need them. And likewise, if your team are dropping clauses into the contract directly, you know they're putting in the right approved clause. The clever thing about them as well is that they come with a drafting note. So here is the clause and here is the drafting note, so that when the junior lawyer is dropping it in, they have to look at the drafting note and say, I might just use the word definition, take a defined term and add it to the definition section, or I shouldn't use this if I'm doing something for this type of client, or I should only use this if I'm doing something for this type of client. So you actually add a training feature into the contract tool as well, into the draft tool as well. The final thing I want to talk to you about is this purpling before I open up for questions, and I appreciate there's been some more chat questions coming through, which I will address in a minute. But the next thing to note is the purpling. And the purpling is a really neat feature for particularly remote working as we're in right now. Defined terms are every lawyer's nightmare, because you look at the defined term and you go, oh, what does that mean again? And you scroll up to the top of the document where the defined term was, and you read it and you go, yep, okay, that's what it means. And you scroll back down to where you were and you, oh, where was I again? Oh, by the time you work out where you were again, you've forgotten what the defined term says. This means I can click on it and it brings up on the sidebar over here the defined term from the contract, which is great. And that means I don't have to scroll up and down. And it's not just searching in the definition section, it's also searching, for example, within the clause. So you can see here we've defined force majeure event actually in the clause. And then we've said in the definition section that force majeure event has the meaning given in clause 32.1, which is this clause. And then it's brought through clause 32.1 as well, because there's not much point in it telling me it's in 32.1 and not then giving me this, because I've got to go then yo-yo scroll to find it. So this to me, in and of itself, saves about 20 minutes per contract review, just having this to hand. It also does it with cross-referencing. So clause cross-references, so 32.1, this clause 32 is referring to clause 32.1, and it will bring up clause 32.1 in the sidebar for me as well. So that to me is hugely helpful clause in your reviewing of contracts, particularly in a remote environment that we're in at the moment. So I think that's everything I wanted to show you. So just to recap, these are the concepts that it has been pre-trained on, with thousands of legal hours of clause examples and how to look for and what makes up a dispute resolution clause and what makes up a confidentiality clause. We've trained it on that. We can train it on specific clauses. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks to train it on a new specific clause. So that's the AI in practice. We can correct it and we can use for comparison as well. We can then use the purpling for cross-referencing review and definition checking. We can extract data from it as well. So I'm now going to turn this off and go back to the chat feature and just make sure we've got some questions we've got coming through here. So where am I? So here we go. So Tom asked, will you use the tool for 3? Yes, I do. I do use it for 300-page contracts, particularly for my comparison shelf, particularly for my definitions checker, and for the cross-referencing checker as well. And it's absolutely really useful for those. Is it useful for bespoke and complex? Absolutely. Again, while it might be a complex contract, a lot of the provisions are going to be similar. So liability will always be a very important clause to look at, and certain other things in there. So it is absolutely used in the bespoke and complex, probably more so, to be honest, than the highly repeatable, high volume agreements, because you kind of know what you're looking for there. You don't really need the AI to go find it, particularly if there's similar contracts over and over again. Is the AI good at things it's seen before, but less reliable on innovative or unusual agreements? Where it's been trained on those sort of 15 to 20 key clauses, it's very good. Whether that's a US-based all-in-block caps contract, or with paragraphs this large and no punctuation or particularly good grammar used in them, it's fine. It catches all of that stuff. In fact, it's trained a lot on US contracts because that's where we're selling a lot of this. If it's looking for specific clauses in that Boolean search, doesn't really matter how complex or innovative or unusual the contract is, it'll find it for it. So hopefully that was helpful for that answer. I'm wondering to what extent the software is able to determine whether the contract has a certain effect, even where there is no specific clause or language to that effect. You want it to determine that the governing law, that there's no express choice of law. Is it smart enough to see that place of performance or currency ordering? It'd be worth trying this out. I mean, generally speaking, we have tried to trick it from time to time to see whether it will pick up. I mean, if it just says the governing law of this contract is New Zealand law, it will get that. If you use the word governing law, New Zealand law, it will find those. If you make no reference to governing law and just say the legal system, it would probably pick that up. If you had the word New Zealand in there, it's probably even just going to find that in the governing law, because it'd be strange to probably find any other country in the contract other than perhaps a territorial exclusion or restriction. I think if it was just looking for the word New Zealand, it probably would not flag it. It would need to look for the word governing law. So there is a conversation piece behind this, which is, will people drafting contracts in the future try and trick AI? And that's certainly something we have to consider. How important do you think it is law grad starting out at firms are familiar with this kind of technology? I think it's really important to actually bring it into law school. I think bringing in the use of AI technology and other technology products that are used in practice into law school is important. In fact, I was on a continuing legal education conversation with the Australian tech division of New South Wales University, one of the universities of New South Wales, and they were bringing in AI and other tech product training into law school, and I think that's really important. Question for one of you: is there any dedicated training at law schools on legal drafting? When I went through law school, I barely looked at a contract and how a contract was put together. When I went to Bell Gully on my summer clerkship, that was pretty much the first time I ever saw it. So I'm not sure whether it's moved on in the 21 years since I was at law school. But certainly I think if legal drafting and legal review is not currently in law schools, I think it would be a great thing to bring them in if lawyers want to go down a commercial contracting path. How do you think use of tools like authorDOCS in the drafting of a contract should be taken into account by courts in addressing disputes over contract interpretation? It's all on me. If I use authorDOCS, it's got nothing to do with my client. So if I fail, that's me. It's negligence from me. This is an enhancement to legal services. It is not a replacement of a lawyer. So it is not, and please don't take away that we are using this to replace me. I use this to enhance my ability to review and to draft a contract. When I send it out the door, that's all on me. So if I've got that wrong, I'm not blaming McCarthyFinch. I'm not blaming anyone else for contribution. That's on me. So I choose to use this product to make my job more efficient and more effective. And that's not the counterparty's fault or my client's fault. So it is not designed, if I can leave that very heavily ringing in the ear, it's not designed to replace. It's designed to ameliorate my ability to do my job. Oh, next question. Is it tracking how many contracts you review at 3 a.m. and advising partners of the risk of failure with due diligence? No, that's my job again, to track how many of my team are working at 3 o'clock in the morning on that one. And look, there's something we actually put in the white paper, which is on the McCarthyFinch website. This is designed to help with the quality of life thing as well. I mean, if we are able to use this and be more efficient and more effective, then actually our lawyers aren't working till 3 a.m. doing due diligence. That was what I used to do when I had a cardboard box and 300 contracts to go through. An interesting question that none of you have raised, which I do get a lot, is how does this affect law firm pricing? And you know, we bill on time. So if I'm doing a job that used to take me 2.5 hours and I'm doing it in under an hour, what happened to the hour and a half of time that I used to bill? The answer to that is, we try and serve our clients to get them a product that they can use and get it really quickly back to them. And if that means we get that job done more effectively, they may use us more regularly, rather than using us perhaps once and going, damn, that was really expensive. I don't want to use that law firm again because it took so long. So if we can show the market that we can do things more efficiently and more effectively, then others will get more work, in which case we finish that job more quickly, we move on to the next job for the client more quickly, and they like what we do and they keep coming back to us. I think the danger is actually for those who don't have a product like this, they will seem to be the laggards and probably would be too expensive to do a job. Are we hiring fewer clerks with these efficiencies? Nope. No change to our hiring process as a result of this. In fact, they love using this product because they are able to move more quickly up the value chain. They get trained by the product, the product is training them rather than having to wait for a senior lawyer to come and talk to them about why that clause is important or not. It's certainly not. This product is not affecting law firm hiring. So no, it is not meaning that we need 50% fewer lawyers to do the job. It means we can take on more work and do it at a more efficient time frame. So our lawyers are not working till all hours of the day and night, which is just not good for anybody's health or well-being. So the juniors are able to step up the value chain much more quickly than we used to. I used to sit and review contract after contract after contract, which had no client contact at all. This now means that we can help the junior lawyers get through that process much more quickly and step up the value chain much more quickly. So no, it is not removing the lawyers. Law firms have moved away from what is traditionally that massive triangle that was done a long, long time ago, because clients don't necessarily want to see lots and lots of junior lawyers on files. They want to see people who know how to do things more quickly. And if actually our junior lawyers are able to get up the value chain more quickly, doing a better job using a tool like this, that's actually been more beneficial for everybody. The number of lawyers being taken into law firms has been on a reducing path for a number of years, not due to AI, simply due to the fact that how clients use us these days.
Tom, can I just ask a follow-up question about that?
Sure.
Sometimes, do you find that if you're creating efficiency with your contract review, it means that maybe you can also expand the scope of what you're offering the client or add value in other areas? I sometimes find, for example, if I'm busy, I will really only be able to give quite a narrow opinion or just on a couple of questions. But if I had more free time, I might be able to advise on a number of other matters that the client is actually interested in. It's just kind of a time issue, right?
Yeah, I guess it's a question of what the client's prepared to pay for. If they just want your answer and done more quickly, then you get it more quickly and they'll pay a less amount for that. But what I found, and again what we wrote in the white paper, is that I've stopped having to spend so much time on the contract review process or reviewing my juniors' review, because I know if they use this, I'm much more confident they've got it right. I will always check what they've done. It's my job. I'll always check what they've done, but I have more confidence that they will get there quicker using this, which means I've got more time in my day, which means I can think more about what my clients need and then go to them and say, hey, I've been thinking this industry is changing. You might want to think this way. I didn't have time to do that before, so now I do, which means I can go to the client and say this, and they can go, that's a really good idea. Can you help me with that? So it means I can reach into the clients now more carefully, more strategically, and say, I think we could do something differently. Rather than being reactive, which is what most lawyers are, which is they wait for the client to ask them the question. I can now think more proactively. So that's where I think we can use our time better and bring more work in. Because if we can expand the work that we do for the client, helps them, we're helping them to become better at what they do, and it helps us because obviously more work's coming in. So yeah, that's how I see it. Tom's question, how would I respond if someone called this an automated decision-making system? I would respond and say, sure, however you want to describe it. But I think Nick might have a view on that one, Tom, and I know you know Nick, so maybe talk to him about that one. I think we're out of time. Oh, you've got more questions? No, I don't have to run away. I'm in my. As you can see where I am. I'm locked down in level 2 and level 3 in Auckland, so I've got nowhere to go. So happy to answer more questions if people have got them.
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, Tom.
Sorry to kick, I feel like I'm writing whole paragraphs at you, and it's interesting watching a lawyer do one of these because I can see that you can speak and read at the same time, unlike some others who do webinars. The question about sort of executable rules is sort of related to the Law Foundation research I'm doing on legislation as code, and one of the things that keeps popping up is the distinction between being able to sort of process the text of a rule and then actually a computer being able to execute it. So if you gave a data set to a computer that was running these rules, would it produce an answer for you? So I suppose I'm thinking of sort of legal expert systems where you can actually use this contract to ask a system an answer to a legal question under the contract. Is that something that you've considered with this?
No. So you're even stepping me right out of the process entirely and getting, a contract comes in, it assesses it as if I would have assessed it and gives me an outcome. Is that what you're saying?
I think it would almost, like an initial use case would be that you could build a chatbot around the contract, and an ordinary person on the street could ask the answer to a legal question as determined by the rules of the contract.
So McCarthyFinch's first product did that. It was called Get Free Legal Advice. And that was it had natural language processing questions, so you could ask it by voice, and you could type in a chat question as well, and you could upload your employment contract, fire in a bunch of questions, and it would bounce back with preset questions back, and it would tailor that down. And if it could work it out easily, it would then spit out I think you should do this type process. It was never sort of formal legal advice or anything like that. It would spit out we think you should do this, and help people with like an employment question or a lease question, things like that. Where we dialed away very quickly from that is because it was such a narrow scope of questions that lawyers, when they engage in a conversation, their minds will go off in multiple different directions, and find often that a person asking a question with legal advice, that's not actually the question they want an answer to. It moves about 3 steps to the left or to the right. So what we found was you'd get an answer which was kind of like, that's the answer, but it's not really the answer to the question. When you can see the question they're actually trying to ask when you go back through the chat and sort of validate it. So we found it was kicking, people would come back and say, that's not what I mean. And then it would go, I'll refer you to a lawyer. And then it would refer to us, and we'd then pick up the question and go, I see what you're trying to ask, and here's the answer. So I think it'll get there, but it's going to take a lot of, and lawyers always get picked up on this one. It's like you try and say that your area will never be beaten by a computer. It's quite tricky because over years of experience, you have heard so many questions in a same or similar way and you know that they sometimes go off in different directions. It's hard to put that into a tree, like a chat tree, to then get you to ask the right question to then make it do the evaluation and provide the answer. I'm not saying it won't get there. I just think it's going to take a long time to get there. So does that answer your question? I'm not sure it does.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks. It was a curly one, so thanks.
Any more for any more? And if not, I'll hand it back to you, Wayne. And
yeah, I think that is probably our time. I just want to say thanks to Tom and everyone for joining the TeLENZ Tech webinar series. There was great interest, and I'm sure there'll be a few more demo downloads over the next little while. Thanks again, Tom.
Pleasure. Thanks, everybody.